WJEC were pleased to partner Nate at their 2014 annual conference in Bristol this summer. As part of the conference, we were proud to present two Welsh-born writers, Dannie Abse and Owen, who are both famous for their novels and their poems. Both writers feature on our English specifications. Shears's acclaimed Skirrid Hill is a set text on WJEC A-level English specifications, and his novel, Resistance, is a set text at GCSE. Dannie Abse's novel, Ash on a Young Man's Sleeve, is also a set text for GCSE literature. The following clips are taken from the talks where both Dannie and Owen read extracts from their respective work. A question and answer session from the floor followed. The authors talked of their craft and gave an insight of the influences in their writing.
So that's Arthur, who opens Pink Mist. As I said, I was very keen to speak to the women in these boys' lives, because it soon became very clear that it was very often the women who really have to stay on the front line of any sort of psychological or physical wounding, quite often for the rest of their lives. And this next extract is from the point of view of Hads's mother. So when Hads is sent to Afghanistan, he's made a Valon man. So that's one of the men who is sweeping for the explosives under the ground. And he finds that he's very, very good at this, but eventually his luck runs out and he's blown up. He's flown back to Britain very quickly, and it's then that his mother comes to see him in the hospital. And this is very much based on a true story, I was told. At first, when they pulled back the curtain, I felt relief. A wave of warm joy. There'd been a mistake, a crossing of wires. This wasn't my boy. How could it be? There'd been a wrong call. Whoever he was, he didn't look like Hayden at all. Poor sod didn't have his face, and yes, I did think of his mother too, the woman who'd have to take my place. But when I told them, the nurse asked me to look at his shoulder. Is this, she said, Hayden's tattoo? My stomach dropped. I wanted to be sick. I traced it with my fingertip, then looked up at his face again. It was swollen, bruised about the eyes, 4 days' growth singed dark along his chin. Yes, I said, it's him. I gave him hell when he came back with that new tat. He was just 16, but adamant, a coiling dragon, its tail wrapped about his arm. It was up to him, he said, now he's a man. I grounded him for a week. But of course he got out. He was that kind of kid, still is. School couldn't hold him, more energy than his brother and sister together, which is why I was so pleased when he got that job at Next. At last I thought he'd quieten down, earn some cash, find a girl maybe up at the mall, stop hanging out with those older lads. Some hope in that. That wasn't Had's. But then nor was this, a living lie. This boy in the hospital bed, dried blood below his ear, the sheet going flat a couple of feet too soon, just nothing after his thighs. What have they done to him? That was all I could think. What have they done to my lad, my boy, my Hads?
An early poem of mine that I'm glad I've written is a wedding song, and I'm particularly pleased about it because it's used these days at secular weddings. Singing, today I married my white girl, beautiful in a barley field, green on thy finger, a grass blade curled. So with this ring I thee wed, and send our love to the loveless world of all the living and all the dead. Now no more than vulnerable human, we more than one, less than two, are nearly ourselves in a barley field, and only love is the rent that's due, though the bailiffs of time return anew to all the living but not the dead. Shipwrecked, the sun sinks down harbours of a sky, and loads its liquid cargoes of marigolds, and I and my white girl lie still in the barley. Who else wishes to speak What more can be said by all the living against all the dead? Come then, all you wedding guests, green ghost of trees, gold of barley, you blackbird priests in the field, you wind that shakes a pansy head, fluttering on a stalk like a butterfly. Come the living and come the dead. Listen, flowers, birds, winds, whirls, tell all today that I married more than a white girl in the barley. For today I took to my human bed flower and bird and wind and world and all the living and all the dead. I'll move to more recent poems. In fact, quite a number of the poems are about old age. Sometimes, though I'm 90, I feel quite well, and I feel I'm only 89. Talking to myself. In the mildew of age, all pavements slope uphill, slow, slow, towards an exit. It's late, and light allows the darkest shadow to be born of it. Courage, the ventriloquist bird cries, a little guard he is, censor of language. Remember plain Hardy and Dannie Abse in their inspired, wise predotage? I, old man, in my new timidity, think how profligate I wasted time. Those yawning postponements on rainy days, those paper hat hours of benign frivolity. Now time wastes me, and there's hardly time to fuss for more vascular speech. The aspen tree trembles as I do, and there are feathers in the wind. Quick, quick, speak, old parrot. Do I not feed you with my life? I think I should read something more cheerful. Blues song. Some things there always are. Eros in the end must lose. Picasso paints a guitar. That way he sings the blues. Henri Matisse harvests color more Tangiers than Toulouse. He says work can cure everything, a prescription to quell the blues. Russian cows jump over the moon, very strong is Russian booze. But Chagall's cow never lands, otherwise he'd sing the blues. O'Keeffe paints flowers in close-up, and critics look for Freudian clues. Female genitalia, voyeur, no wonder the lady sings the blues. Is that a telephone or a lobster? Surely Salvador is confused. He says, dial the phone and hear the lobster trying to sing the blues. Rothko squares a mirror with blood. There's blood in his every bruise. Paints his own reflection out and soundlessly sings the blues. Pale moon-faced Francis Bacon eerily shrieks and spews humanoid freaks into a cage. Odd way to sing the blues. Body detective Lucian Freud magnifies his sexless nudes. The uglier the better. That's how he sings the blues. The aloneness of the artist. So Hockney paints his trees in twos, and time itself in colours passing, a covert way to sing the blues. Damien likes his sheep well pickled. I prefer my meat in stews. Let collectors shell their millions, soon they'll sing the blues. Is Tracy Emin's messy bed pertinent British art? J'accuse. Not for sixpence would I sleep in it, to stop her bawling out her blues. Don't speak of artists' rivalry or their delight in painting nudes. Though every time Pablo scored, Henri sang the blues. Do I wish to be a painter acclaimed with Buff's reviews? All I lack is talent. That's why I sing the blues.
I'm interested in what you said about poetry being read or poetry being heard, and I wondered if you felt personally if your poems were more effective if they were on the page or if they were spoken by someone, and whether that person should actually be you or someone else.
I mean, I think personally, I write my poems for the page. You know, I write them for that most incredible intimate intimate space between a writer and a reader. You know, I still think it's the most immediate form of communication. There is no intermediary. There's no, you know, film director or musician or conductor in the way. It's straight. It's the poet whispering in your ear, and that's the moment that I write for. But to get that right, for it to work, I think it also has to be able to live and survive and to really work, you know, when those words are printed on the air. And I think certainly that when I write, I'm constantly reading my poems out loud, because that's the only way that you can really, you know, sort of hit that tuning fork against them and you can hear the rhythms. And you probably heard that in something like Pink Mist, I mean, it was partly the rhythm that I was most interested in this, in how can you use rhythm to excavate meaning and emotion, especially in dramatic monologues, when, you know, it's so important that the language is a constant negotiation. This has to always feel credible, that it's being spoken by the characters. So although there is my voice in there, it's predominantly their voice. So you can't suddenly sort of fly off into elaborate language for those emotive moments. So that's when you turn to rhythm instead. And it was interesting that when this was performed on radio, I think, you know, the radio actors did as they should, and they very much naturalised those rhythms, so that when you heard it on radio, it was just a heightened speech. You could just hear the verse at the edges. But then when I hear it, or rather when I read it, as you heard, I really like to bring that rhythm to the surface, because it's a very important part. And I think, you know, even free verse only works as free verse if it has a very strong relationship, I think, to song and to music and to rhythm.
Danny, have you got any?
Well, I just commented on what Owen was saying, you know, about how the importance of sound is, and the sound and the sense has to go together. And but in a way, the sound can hypnotize the reader. So, for example, I've been rereading Dylan Thomas's lately, and I'm thinking how I was not critical of certain things because its total musicality had hypnotized me. Of his best poems, by the way, still I find very thrilling.
Thank you. Obviously, we're all teachers of English here, or have been anyway. We've all been to school. Danny, what literature did you study in school, and how did you respond to it at the time?
No, I went to a very bad school, but I did, which I was taught by Christian brothers. But I enjoyed playing games. I played in rugby and cricket and so on. So I had a happy time there. But the poems they taught me in school were all about lesser celandines and daffodils, and didn't interest me at all, you know. And, but my brother Leo, who is some of you may have heard of because he became a member of Parliament, was 7 years older than me, and he was politically conscious even when he was very young, and he used to bring books into the house, or rather magazines, which about the Spanish Civil War at the time, and about unemployment in the Welsh valleys and so on. And I found that these poems in there were not about lesser celandines, and had the immediacy that Owen's verse drama has. And so that's what touched me onto poetry.
Okay. Thank you. Owen?
For me, it was very much R.S. Thomas, and to be honest, I was just sitting here. He's the only poet that I can remember studying in school. So maybe I didn't go to a great school either. I don't know, but I did have a great English teacher. I absolutely did. And she became, well, I think that she was already very, very passionate about R.S. Thomas, and we studied him in the sixth form, and he really became a very important poet for me, you know, in those sort of later teenage years into my early 20s. And, you know, because he's a fantastic poet for sparseness and economic language, but yet these incredibly beautiful metaphors. And it was seeing, you know, the marriage of that economy with the generosity, actually, of his visual world that really excited me. And he's still a poet, actually, who I'll go back to sort of recharge my batteries on, or, you know, when I need a stern lesson in economy and less words, I go back to RS, you know, for that.
Yes, absolutely. And of course it was the centenary of his birth.
It was, and of course, you know, we didn't really hear that much about it. We've heard loads about Dylan Thomas, and exactly like Dannie Abse, you know, the best of Dylan Thomas's work is fantastic, and he was this seismic event in English language poetry. But actually, you know, if I was stuck on a desert island and I had to choose, it would be RS I'd be taking, and I think it was a shame that we didn't have as much in his centenary year.
I'd take Edward.
Oh yeah, or indeed Edward Thomas. I'd take anyone called Thomas as a surname.